On First Down, you'll hear interviews with some of the top minds in sports, as well as actionable tips and strategies you can implement into your daily life to become a more effective coach. My name is Justin Tichenell, former college football player turned entrepreneur. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now, let's jump into the content. Coach Rickman is the DC and linebackers coach at Flowery Branch HS, which is down in Georgia. So to get things started, can you just share with the audience about your career and how you ultimately got involved in your current role?
Yeah, so I've kind of had a interesting path. When I got out of high school, I graduated high school. I went to college to play and found out pretty quick that, there was a lot considered. I just didn't want to do it anymore, really. And then I was like, okay, let's see what a regular college student looks like. I went to Georgia Southern for that first fall, freshman year. And, found out I was like, it's not just football. I just don't want to be in school anymore. And so I enlisted in the military and joined the Army. I was an infantry, 11 Bravo, and I got stationed. So I did all my training in Fort Benning, Georgia, but I got stationed in Fort Wainwright, Alaska, however many miles away. And, it wasn't the best place in the world. I did, to work, but I tried to take it all and run with it. And it was good. It was a good experience. It taught me a lot. I got a lot of college credit for it too. And so when I got out, I came right back to Georgia and enrolled back to Georgia Southern. I didn't know what I was actually a general studies major. I had no clue what I was going to do. And then that, technically true freshman year, I was 22. I met my wife, my now wife. We started dating, and she kind of helped me and guided me through, like, hey, what do you want to do? I don't want to, she's pretty much saying I don't want to be stuck with a guy who doesn't know what he's doing. And she said, it sounds like you like football. So I emailed Steve Pennington at Statesboro High School, who, I mean, she should be on the ballot already for Hall of Fame coach in Georgia. Won some state championships there, but I emailed him. He answered like 5 minutes later in that email because, and he was like, hey, and this was like July, like they were about to hit the ground running for acclimation. And he said, hey, we can use you, come over. So I worked the first year in my undergrad as a freshman, as a volunteer coach. I got my late certification. I didn't get paid. I did it for free. It was the best decision I ever made. He ended up leaving Statesboro High School, going to Southeast Bullock High School for the defensive coordinator job. He called me, asked me to come on with him to work in the secondary. He actually ended up being the head coach before the season started because the head coach at that point at Southeast Bullock moved on. And so I worked that second year with Steve Pennington again, and he threw a lot more responsibility on me. He had, just accepted a head coaching job when he thought he was going to be defensive coordinator. So, that was a blessing in disguise, for both of us. And he ended up, officially retiring after that year. And then the new guy who came in, Barrett Davis, who came in to take Steve Pennington's place, he and I met over cheese and queso at the local Mexican restaurant, and sat there and drew on a napkin for about 2 hours. And he was a defensive guy, so he hired me on. So I was fortunate enough to spend every year in my undergrad coaching high school football in the state of Georgia, and competing in the playoffs after that Statesboro year. Never missed the playoffs. Moved back up to the metro area where I'm from, in the Atlanta area. Went and coached at Eastside, which I'd previously played for in high school. Troy Hoff was the head coach, really good head coach, and Jake Hawthorne was on that staff, still is. He's the head coach now, which kind of put me in a circle. I can get to this later, but I call it the West Georgia Mafia. I think a group of coaches that were all there and graduated from West Georgia, they're just really, really elite, and they kind of have some of these jobs in the state, and at the high school level that people go after, So I spent a year at Eastside, and then Mill Creek posted a job looking for a DB coach, working with the corners. Man, I love D-side. I didn't necessarily was go looking for something. It popped up. Someone said, "Hey, you might want to talk to Coach Lovelady," and I did, and it was great. Coach Lovelady's probably, and not probably, I personally believe he's the best head coach in high school football in the state of Georgia. And he wouldn't say it himself, but a lot of people say it about him. I spent 2 years in Mill Creek. That second year, we won the 7A state championship, and our kids were they were just excellent. And that whole experience was wild and a blessing. Something I don't even look back on as being rewarding in the state championship, just more so just being a part of something like that and be able to see all those weeks of it's not just 15 weeks. It's a 32-week season almost because you got to work through the summer. It was just special. And that, this past season, I was at Flowery Branch, so I left Mill Creek to become the Jewish coordinator, to run a system, challenge myself to do that. Was hungry enough to do that, and found a lot of priceless experience. We weren't a state championship team and like we were at Mill Creek, and that's okay. And we were talking earlier, that win loss column, that doesn't really tell the story. Those kids and coaches know how that season went, and there was a lot gained that you can't pay for, especially to me and a guy being in a career. I can't go paying for that. That's just something that you work towards, and you hit the ground running. So, I'm approaching. I was just thinking about it driving this morning. I'm approaching 10 years in this business. I'm approaching a decade. It's flown by, and I'm really fortunate to be, to have the circle I have and to have the network I have, and I'm just appreciative of that.
And going back to your days in the military, can you talk about some of the lessons you learned that have served you well, like as a football coach now?
The military, it was unique in the way that, here, I'll break it in two parts, like personal, just intrinsic improvement, and from a strategic standpoint, um, it does, especially being in infantry. You're a ground soldier, so you work with teams of, you know, each platoon's going to have 28 to 28 guys in it, um, and you have team leaders and squad leaders and platoon sergeants and all these people that you have to answer for or answer to as a guy in my rank, and it was very humbling. I was obviously in the best shape of my life, which was great, um, but more so from the mental aspect, I quickly in basic training identified, because the drill sergeants identified it for me. What were the things, that the areas of growth that I needed to have in order to be anything relevant to them. Like I wasn't. No one goes into basic training and they're not, like, that's the whole reason for it. It's 18 weeks, and to become a tool for the military, and it allowed me to see those things, and I still think about those things every day. Um, you know, if it's, doing what you're saying you're going to do, holding yourself accountable, all those, the self talk that you have with yourself, trying to make sure that you're not toxic with yourself, and moving forward, and that really did a lot for me, and I think it set me up for a career in coaching, and I can really easily, um, you know, I can put across personal experience with kids and say, hey, I was there, man, and I can say, and I can give them a specific example, and they know it was genuine. And I'm not looking for a personal gain from it. I'm just trying to tell you, like, if this is what you want to do, then you have to be able to do this, and this is how you get better in that area. And so I did, and one of my things I was going to talk about was, for these young coaches, is everything you do, and go through and experience, whether it's inside football or not, systemize it. So, you know, what I just talked about, talking to kids, not the millennials, the whatever they call them, Gen
Yeah,
Z.
Gen X or Gen Z.
Yeah. So like reaching the Gen Z athlete, the whole generation's odd. But when you break it down to its core, if you systemize the way you approach it, because it worked for a few kids in that generation, then now I can lean back on that. And so I systemized that, like, and just wrote it down for myself and didn't share with anybody. Not because I'm selfish, but because, you know, that's the only reason I did it, you know? And so, and one of my pieces of advice was that, systemize everything. If you systemize the way, for the first step is your routine, systemize it. Why are you doing those things? What's the bigger picture? And I think our kids really appreciated that.
Yeah, and I think, from having a lot of these conversations, just any type of system you can have in place, whether it be coaching or as an athlete or, as a business person, I think that's going to better serve you in the future just because you're not like going by the seat, like by the seat of your pants, you're not winging it. And when you reflect on some of those experiences too, like I found that those are the best ways to not only like learn about yourself but learn about the people around you if you're a coach but also a player. So can you give some specific examples of like some systems that you have in place that have served you well?
Well, the one I just talked about, which really, if you ask any coach, I'm sure they'll say the relationship with their players is the most important aspect of coaching. If you can't relate to the players, it doesn't matter how, schematically brilliant you are. That means, that means you can only keep it to yourself. You can't, teach it. So the way I see, really, it started in teaching. It started in the classroom. I'm a sped teacher, so I spent 6 years of my college career studying this stuff, and it's all psychology. And so I broke it down as responsiveness and support. Those are the two things I think of every day, every conversation, and that's just through repetition. So if I'm in a program and our head coach says this is the culture that we're going to have and these are the standards and expectations that we have, then it demands responsiveness when it's not met. It also demands responsiveness when it is met. But immediately after that responsiveness, it demands the kid and you as a servant of the public, really, but also to that kid, it demands support. And so I'm never going to say to a kid to stop doing something without giving them support on why that's important or how to get them better in that area. So that's the way. And I broke it down. I've got a little organizer of sentence like frames of how to give that feedback. And we can get stuck in, I'm saying, I'm kind of speaking for everybody, but where we kind of always just respond to that thing that needs to be fixed. Well, if it needs to continue to be cultivated, if it needs to continue to happen over and over and over again, we need to say something for that. And the support might look a little different. And, that's just educational psychology. But, I have a young coach, first year coach who hopped on board on our staff, our defensive side. And he was really good because he's younger. He's in that generation technically, and so he's really good at you can tell the kids enjoy talking to him. And I said, hey, you know, I tried not to do what early coaches did that were a little older, a lot older than me. I try not to say like can't be their friend, and I'm like, well, that I always thought that was a weird way to say things. I think more so it's like we need to be the support for that player. So what does that support look like?
Right.
One of them is to respond. If I need you to not do that because it's the standards put on the culture, if I don't say something, then in my eyes, then at the end of the year in the evaluation meeting, I can't check that box. If I let It's not letting something slide. I'm not trying to be an authoritarian. It might be something, and I'm gonna evaluate that on a scale. If it's something minor, that might be a nonverbal thing. It might just be a look. It might just be come on, what are we doing? Maybe they didn't count their reps, and for a fact they didn't count their reps. It's like, hey, fix that. I'm giving you an opportunity right now to fix that. And that's all. That's coaching in general. Whether you're installing a coverage or you're installing that culture in the weight room. I mean, all those things. And for young coaches, that's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to walk into a weight room as a young coach, first year coach, whether you're in college or whether you just got your teaching certificate, and confidently go up and there and know what the culture is. And I think, a lot of it's just attention to detail, and some of it's just being there for an extended amount of time. And every coach feels that way probably. If they go to new school, they say, "Hey, at the beginning of the season, how comfortable were you addressing those things?" That number is going to be a lot lower than at the end of the year, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I feel like just like what you were saying too, you know, if every coach was like a player's friend, then you wouldn't really accomplish anything. You have to be able to hold everybody accountable. And I think that goes back to the head coach holding his staff accountable because, especially for a young guy just coming into a program, they're not really going to know what the standard would be unless you communicate that to them. And in the same way, if you as a defense coordinator, you're communicating that to like whatever position coach that guy was, like if you're doing that properly, then he'll be a little bit more confident when going to the players.
Yeah,
And
and I've never had kickback from it ever, from anyone. But you know, and that's because we all care about what we're doing. We all want to do better, and we all love the kids. And I've never met a coach who didn't. But if it was a situation like that where we're saying, hey, you can't be best friends with this kid, it's like, hey, do you really love him? Well, what's best for him at 17 years old is for him to figure out how to be a man. And when he graduates high school, when he doesn't have you every day, he's got to know how to respond. And if he doesn't, he thinks that everybody's his friend, or he thinks that he can do it because he's likable, then we're doing a disservice to him. And it's going to, it doesn't kick us in the rear end in the future. It only kicks him in the rear end in the future. And so I've always been in that mindset where, and that probably stems from those military days where I'm trying to, through my experience and through the things I know I struggled with as a man, like let's try to fix these things for you. And when you do it right, I think you learn a lot more about a kid, and they open up a little bit more. They come to you with those problems that they have, and a lot of those problems are super, be honest, very depressing. And we have to be able and ready to say, to confidently look at them in the eyes and say, "Wait, you're gonna be okay. Do you need support? What do you need from me? Do you need us to sit down and talk?" Well, that's a whole different approach, right? In my background, I never knew my father. I had a dad throughout my childhood, but he was alcoholic. But he wasn't my biological father. I didn't know that till I was 16. Like I spent a lot of my time from 16 to 22 mad at the world. And I see a lot of kids right now, both male and female, mad at the world, trying to fight a battle they can't see. And so, I'll always bring it up. Like um, early on in the semester, if I see a kid who has no motivation, it doesn't matter if they play football or baseball or nothing. I'm gonna say, hey, what you're doing, I'm not mad at you. I'm just telling you what you're doing. It's a red flag, and it's not normal. Like kids want to learn, kids want discipline, they want those things, and that kid probably still wants that. They just don't know. Um, they don't know who they're mad at, you know.
right.
And I think having those conversations, I think that's what a lot of counties try to get to with their professional development. It's just, there's always this looming thing over our heads as educators, and those are grades and GPAs. Well, how do we get there? How does a kid improve their GPA when they just failed every class? It's pretty grim to think about. They're waiting on something to save them,
Right.
without them having to put forth a lot of effort. Well, hey, in my eyes, I'm gonna say, hey, someone needs to build a relationship with that kid and tell them that they can't do that.
Yeah,
Nothing's gonna save them. Um, you know, there's no golden ticket. They got to do it, and they don't have to do it alone.
for sure. And I think some key points, just kind of highlighting what we talked about today, just comes down to process and having systems in place. And just as a last point, as you're talking, an idea that popped into my head was something that I use on a daily basis, and that's the Eisenhower decision matrix. If you've ever heard of that, where it's You have the four quadrants where on the
Uh,
top left you have do, which is like urgent and important, not urgent, important, and that's the stuff that's really going to like help you and grow the program and like grow yourself as a person. And then on the bottom it has not important, urgent, and that's stuff that you can delegate. Especially as you being as a DC, and then on the bottom right it's like delete. So just you talking about that and like the systems that we talked about today, that just reminded me about that matrix, and that served me well in my career so far. So
and
with that,
like I love that, and a lot of kids don't know how to prioritize those things.
yeah,
They'll that's probably the driving factor in most like physical altercations in high school is a kid not being able to delete something or prioritize something as less important and just forgetting about it and putting at the top of their list what's going to impact themselves and like, we talk to kids all the time about being unselfish, like, but when it comes to intrinsic thoughts, when it comes to intrinsic decisions that are going to affect you and only you got to be selfish and think about yourself for a second. What if you're thinking about that bad decision right now? If you don't think it's a bad decision, then you're not thinking about it. You should be, but you're not. And so now you're just an impulsive person. Like you just do
right.
everything on impulse. I try, and like you're saying, we try to stop those impulses, and just try to build on top of good things. And over time, I think that's where coaches, especially football coaches, I think it's a special deal with football coaches because it's not just the fall, it's the summer. We get to see them when they're not in school. We get to and sometimes those kids want to stick around for a long time. And I've always been in the field house in the summer after practice for a couple hours, and kids are there. They might not be talking to me, but there's a reason that they're there still. Um, and hey, go talk to that kid just to see what they're doing. It's not like, hey, you still stay here. I'm just hanging out. What's up? And I think that's where we make the biggest impact. If you do those things right, and this is kind of what I learned throughout all my experience. If you do those things right, and where your feet are, and make that place, and you can leave it thinking you did better with those kids than it was before, maybe, or you added something into that culture. Then your wins and losses, all that stuff handles itself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, totally agree there. And as we're kind of wrapping up today, Coach, any last words you want to share with the audience?
Um, for young guys, um, I value those young guys, those current college kids right now. Some of them don't know if they want to be a coach or not, and or they don't have that opportunity in front of them. Two things. Number one is, if you want to find an opportunity, there's one for you. You just might not get paid for it. Go ask around. Um, you know, there is no lesser role, at any level of football or basketball or baseball. It doesn't matter. Middle school, there's jobs out there for people to take. They'll pay for your life coaching certification and get you on right now. That's experience on your resume right now, that could lead to a job somewhere else or with that program. So that's my first piece of advice. Number two would be, if you talk about how much if you talk about whether it's offense, defense, special teams, then you better be studying that game. You better be studying in the off season. You better be doing stuff that you can measure and also make tangible for an interview to be prepared. Um, you know, Even if you're into coaching and you're like me, almost 10 years in. I study more. I'm a defensive guy. I study more offense than I do defense. Probably for the entire offseason, I don't look at defense. I study offenses. I like to stay in the trends of offense. I like to almost act like an OC for a lot of time, and then I'll bring it back to my system that I already have. This experience at Flowery Branch has given me, more than I could ever ask for because it made it tangible. Like I can put it on paper, I can put it on film, I can make the cut up, I can show the example, I can work on something like that. And if there's any guy, I don't know anybody like this, but I know for myself, like, delete that thought, like you said, like, delete that thought when you think for a second that you can do it better. You should serve your head coach. You should serve your coordinator. Make this their time right now. and improve something that they're doing every day, and take something off their plate every day without being asked. And I think that goes a long way. Obviously, stay in your lane, but if you're doing those things for them, setting up the practice field, painting lines on the practice field, you hear something that needs to be done, and hey, don't make coach coordinator do that. I'll do that. Let him go, do the things he needs to do. And I think those things are things that probably don't go on a resume as much, but that head coach notices that. That coordinator who's about to be a head coach, he notices that, and I think that's where your growth in the career, that's where it takes off.
For sure. Well, Coach, thank you very much for sharing today. It was awesome talking with you, and best of luck this off season.